Southwestern family of companies welcomes you to the Action Catalyst. Each week, our diversely and amazingly accomplished guests share their insights and inspirations to help us ignite our own. So let's invest attention together to breathe, to reflect and refocus, and decisively defeat that voice we call Mr. Mediocrity. Then let's enjoy moving forward to make a positive difference in our world. Privileged to be your host, this is Dan Moore. Today's guest on the Action Catalyst is Mike Scholes, Chief Operating Officer of Southwestern family of companies. It's hard for me to not call him General Mike Scholes, but for 33 years, he served our country as a member of the U.S. Army, eventually becoming a general officer. He eventually became Chief of Staff for the NATO forces that were helping to keep freedom ringing throughout the world, particularly in Europe, in one of the most conflict-ridden parts of our world. Mike has a fascinating backstory. He grew up in a military family. You'll hear a little bit about that. But above all, he is a principled individual who makes decisions not according to emotion, but according to principle. Family is very important to him. Duty is very important to him. Service to others is important to him. Teamwork is important to him, and so is compassion. You're going to learn a great deal about that. He worked his way up through the ranks, starting as an enlisted man, and when he ultimately retired, his values were so strong that when he saw Southwestern family of companies' values, he saw what an alignment there was. And we were very fortunate to have a mutual friend introduce us to Mike. Among other things, in addition to being responsible for our facilities and all of our internal operations and communications, he's been asked to head up our COVID response and has done a brilliant job of that, keeping people safe. So we're going to switch now to the interview. Let's welcome Mike Scholes. Mike, welcome.
Oh, thank you, Dan. Thank you for having me. I look forward to being on the Action Catalyst since I first heard about it last year. So it's exciting to finally be on here with you and have this conversation.
Well, we are recording this at a time that is about 4 months after the United States went into emergency reaction to the COVID crisis. And among other things, Mike has been in charge of our COVID response as our company, making sure that our hundreds of employees are safe, that all standards are adhered to, that our customers are being taken care of, and that people keep their attitudes straight. And Mike, I have to think that some of your background, which is so incredible, has come to roost here in making all this possible. Just for the listeners that may not fully grasp it, more than 30 years of service to our country in the military, starting as an enlisted person, eventually becoming a Brigadier General, and helping us internationally. His involvement with NATO in the Balkan region and making such a difference for peace, which is really what it's all about. And then thought he could retire, but somehow this opportunity became too perfect for his background and all of his preparation. So, Mike, you've done so much. And first of all, thank you for all you've done for our country, as well as what you've done for our people here in Southwestern family of companies.
No, it's honestly the 33 years of service. It was an honor. I look forward to wearing my uniform every single day. Come from a military background. My father was military for 34 years, retired general officer, Special Forces Ranger, Ranger Hall of Famer. So I kind of grew up in that environment. And, for me and going into the military, really, and walking straight in from getting my commission from North Georgia College. It's a military school in North Georgia mountains near the mountain ranger phase of Ranger School. But walking out of that school and into the 82nd Airborne, it really started me on a career path and learning some principles based off the adverse situations that I was put in early on that really has followed me throughout my career. And it's those principles, a set of 9 principles that I've really followed. And in every unit I went in, used it as my leadership philosophy, trained my soldiers on it. And in those units, learn more things that I would add to that framework. But those 9 principles have stuck with me all the way into this job. And as a COO, it is certainly in the last 4 or 5 months, a lot of those different positions that I held really have prepared me to be able to respond and help direct this company in times of COVID. As the former British Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli said, there's no education like adversity. And certainly, not only is this company learning that, but that really has been the mantra for my career.
Well, Mike, anybody that is willing to help defend our country is going to put themselves into harm's way. And when they become a leader, as you did, you also have the responsibility for others. I happen to know from different conversations that when you were just 22 years of age, you found yourself on an airplane on your way to the Middle East at the beginning of Desert Storm with really one of the first, if not the first unit to be heading out there. What were some of the thoughts that went through your head at that time as you were facing this humongous force, much bigger than we would have on the ground at that time, and how you reacted as a leader in those times?
Yeah, it was a pretty difficult situation. A lot of people don't know it, but in the 82nd Airborne, it's called America's Guard of Honor, and that's for a reason. It's when these conflicts come up, usually the 82nd Airborne, because they can get anywhere in the world in 18 hours or less with a sizable force. And in this case, for Desert Shield, Desert Storm, the 82nd was called, and my father was on the plane in front of me as the Deputy Commanding General of 18th Airborne Corps, and I was one of the first lieutenants on the ground. And so it was really the different reports that we were getting, intel reports, showed an overwhelming force on the ground that they were actually about to attack. So it definitely set in motion a lot of the things, a lot of the training, a lot of the different principles that I learned. It was putting them into practice and actually teaching your soldiers that they can do it, helping them to remember what got them there. Sun Tzu said, victorious warriors win first and then go to war, while defeated warriors go to war first and then seek to win. In this case, the sacrifices, the training, the investment, the blood, sweat, and tears, it's telling them that they're a razor's edge, they're ready for it, and actually preparing them for that particular eventuality of crossing the forward line of troops. Mm-hmm. It's just not normal. It's not normal. It's not every day that someone coming fresh out of college has the lives of 45 soldiers in their hands. And so really, investing in them, giving them, the principles and the different support that they need is where true leadership in those type of adverse situation comes in.
Mm-hmm. Mike, just a question, because I've heard you describe in great detail what that was like and some of the feelings that you had. Many leaders find themselves trying to coach people through situations that they haven't necessarily been through themselves either. What are some things you've learned about how to first keep yourself calm and then get other people to buy into that calm so that people can avoid the instinct to panic and head for the hills?
Right. Well, the solution for leaders is to train your people, to take care of them, be there when they need you. An important aspect of that is they'll be there for you when they need you. If you're taking care of them, they'll take care of you. They look for your strength. The lack of confidence is infectious. I've seen it in units. When they have a commander or when they have a leader who isn't exhibiting or showing the signs of confidence, it has an effect on morale. But the true essence of leadership is you got to unite people around a common mission. You got to provide that purpose, direction, and then the motivation, and then get out of their way. I think it was Ronald Reagan who said, surround yourself with great people, delegate authority, and get out of their way. And certainly when you do that, and you have trained them, they're a razor's edge, you give them that purpose and direction, get out of the way, and they'll conquer, mountains and dragons for you.
Wow, I think it's just phenomenal. And again, our thanks for your willingness to put yourself in harm's way so that we can walk the streets that we can walk in a free manner. It's just incredible. I'm very humbled by that. Um, Very much so. Now, Mike, just another reflection back in your military career. When you were involved with NATO, which of course is a defense organization, but also very much on the ground diplomacy. As I understand it, you had representatives from about 30 different nations. And as the chief of staff, you were having to corral their resources and get them on common ground. Any lessons on how to take people from different cultural backgrounds and merge them into something that is unified in its purpose?
Yeah, I mean, it's about building effective teams. It's it's about building relationships, NATO, and then specifically that command did have 31 different nations on staff, and so every staff meeting, every training exercise, it was about building those relationships, finding that common ground, and then being able to execute your task assigned. But more importantly, especially in that region of the world, the diplomacy aspect of working with those different nations. Because honestly, every nation has their own national objectives, but for that particular host country or for that particular part of Europe, the need to maintain a safe and secure environment was absolutely essential to building those teams. Even with the different purpose and different objectives that each country had, a lot of those nations look to the United States to provide that continuity, to provide that leadership. And for me, and being in that specific situation, in every NATO assignment, it's mandatory that a U.S. general officer is either the commander or the chief of staff, and that provides that glue for NATO to keep that mission alive. But it's all about relationship building. It's all about trusting each other. It's all about building effective teams, and the relationship aspect is essential.
Right. I think probably the notion of command and control is exaggerated in terms of its effectiveness compared to persuasion and relationships and setting a good example. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's about unity of purpose more than it's about unity of command. It's going back to what I said in the beginning. It's about providing that purpose, direction, and motivation. There is a common mission there, which is to create and sustain that safe and secure environment, and reinforcing that is why NATO is there, is to provide that safe and secure environment. That is the continuity. That is the glue.
Which I think is phenomenal. Mike, one thing I've also noticed about you is that you have, I guess, a thirst for knowledge and learning. And it may be one reason that you had trouble staying retired. Somehow just hitting the golf course day after day and going for long walks probably didn't fully do it for you. I know at one point in your career, you got involved with military police, so you went to a police academy. You got involved with fire prevention, so you went to fire academy. You've always been a student, and it seems like you don't ever get complacent. So what tips would you share about how to keep your edge and not just sit back in the rocking chair and look at your medals and read your press releases?
Well, for me, it's just you really, there was one assignment at Fort Knox where it was an opportunity for me. Most assignments you live on base, but in this particular assignment, I had the option to live off base, and I chose to do so because I wanted to be a part of the community. It's really all about community, and I think growing up in a military household and moving everywhere, I really didn't have that sense of community. Yes, we lived on a military base, but ultimately, especially after I graduated high school, we kind of all scattered.
Mm.
And so I knew that the eventuality, one, I didn't know I was going to be a general officer, but two, I knew that ultimately I wanted to end up in a community with my family around me. But that sense of community is very important to me. And so, even moving here was a choice about family. Even retiring from the military early was about uh, my family and making a family decision instead of a me decision. I could have stayed in. I was asked to stay in, but for me at that particular time and place, and coming back from a long deployment, it was really about trying to get centered on my family and being a part of a community. And so
Mm-hmm.
that brought me to Nashville, which is where my family first settled in the early 1800s. And so I'm like the eighth generation to be here. But I like being engaged. I like volunteering for organizations in my community, whether it's the Rotary. I've been involved in the United Way, but also in a lot of VA different committees and councils and efforts to support the military community.
Mm-hmm. So staying involved, staying active, you can be retired, but never lose your heart for service and relationships.
Never,
Yeah.
yeah, never. And really, this job, what attracted me to this job was about the principles. When I first read the guiding principles and the creed for Southwestern family companies, I actually took them and wrote the Army values alongside each one of those principles, because what they were saying there was what I believed in and have believed throughout my life. And I remarked on it, and I even showed it to Dustin and Henry when we were talking in their office. And I said, "Look, I'm here because of this. This is what you believe in, is what I believe in." And I could, be retired. I could sit on my porch. I could watch westerns and combat shows all day long. But for me, it's about being a part of an organization that believes in this. And really, that's what keeps me going. That's what keeps teams going is knowing that and having those principles and having that vision. And for this company who focuses on helping people and helping communities, inspiring people, I'm all in, because that's what I believe in.
Well, we're certainly glad you did, because 6 months after you got started, we found ourselves in the middle of a pandemic. And you have been the strength and the stability and the consistent communication in that, which is just fantastic. One of the many things I admire is that when you do the updates about what we're going to do as a result of the city's regulations, if the regulations say stay home when you can, one of the first things you write is corporate staff will work from home. It's really leading by example, because that's the right thing to do. And by you highlighting that, modeling it, even though I know you've gone in and you've had to check on many parts of our company that you're responsible for, it was a reassuring message. It was a reassuring message that we've got your back. We want to get through this safely, and doing the right thing is a big part of that. So thank you for that too.
No, absolutely. It's all about leading by example and setting the stage for the companies, and for not only our companies, but also the tenants in here. It's keeping them safe and secure and healthy. And that, as a leader, is your first and foremost principle, is to keep your team members safe and healthy.
Right. Well, we're very glad you had 33 years of practice before you moved into this role. Mike, along the way, have you ever hit a figurative brick wall? You probably hit some real brick walls at some point based on your career as a soldier, but something where at the moment you couldn't see around it, couldn't see under it, couldn't see through it. I mean, do you have a thought process when you feel like you're dealing with something that's just insurmountable at the moment. What do you do to calm yourself? Any systematic steps you can share with all of us?
Yeah, it's that's a great question, and there are two principles that I follow. One, I think physical, spiritual, and mental resiliency is absolutely uh, you know important. It's absolutely essential in this type of situation, especially when you're in a very emotional situation or even preparing for one. When your commitment's deeply tested, and certainly in my career, I have found myself in several of those incidents or events. But it's almost a three-legged stool. The physical aspect, you got to keep yourself in shape. You got to eat healthy. Your core is very important. That will help your spiritual aspect of it, or your mental resiliency. If you're strong, if you are of faith, will help you be able to push through those emotional or those deeply tested times, those crisis situations. You've got to have that. I think it was Karl von Clausewitz who said strength of mind or of character is the ability to keep one's head at times of exceptional stress and violent emotion. And I always remembered that
Mm.
because it's true. A lot of that too is what you've grown up with will help you in that mental resiliency and that spiritual resiliency. But also, Dustin talks about all the time. But for me, and as a military officer, it was absolutely essential. It's also positive self-talk. You got to lead yourself. You got to use positive self-talk. I think even Teddy Roosevelt said, "Believe you can, and you're halfway there." I remember a story. There was a SEAL team named Eric Barker who wrote a book. Who talked about a story in there where he said his superior officer, he was a demolitions officer, and he was underwater one time, and he was defusing a mine. And there was so much debris, cables, junk on the floor of the ocean that as he was trying to defuse that mine, became entangled. He couldn't move his hands, he couldn't move his feet. And, so it went through his mind. He says, "So what am I going to do?" Well, he started out with, "Well, I'm still breathing. So that's good." And then he went, "What do I have to do now to help me get free?" Well, he then realized that the knife was there on his thigh next to his hand. And so he got his knife and he started working his way through the problem. But that's an excellent example of positive self-talk. Just like I said early on, when you cross that forward line of troops, knowing that, rounds are going to be coming your way. It's night. You feel like, all heck's going to break loose. It's not a normal action to take that step, but you got to say, okay, if I make it to that mountain, if I make it to that obstacle, I'm halfway there. If I make it there and I go to that next step, that next hill, that next mountain, then I'm 3/4 of the way there. You got to continually give yourself some positive self-talk and lead yourself through those particular crisis situations or emotional situations.
Mm.
That's really how I've handled it.
Which is so key. So, first of all, physical strength and emotional strength, and you work to prepare yourself with those way in advance because it's too late to try to manufacture them when you need them. And then start
Absolutely.
thinking what's the next best thing to do, and do that, and then the next thing, and then do that, and break it down into small bits, and don't look beyond those small bits until you can see your way clear.
Yeah, absolutely. Set small, absolutely set small goals, build momentum, and then take the long view.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta pace yourself and realize that it's a marathon and not a race.
Mm-hmm.
That'll assist you in managing expectations of your teams.
Well, and with this COVID situation, I think we all hoped it was going to be a sprint. but it's turning into a marathon.
Absolutely right.
Right.
Absolutely right.
Um, Mike, what would you say to encourage someone that right now they're really seeking answers? In other words, their career maybe has hit a complete standstill, either because of the virus or other reasons, or their personal life is in just a tough situation, and they're beginning to feel a sense of hopelessness and despair. The phrase I like to use is they look at the cards they've been dealt, and there's not even a face card, let alone an ace there. What would you say to encourage somebody that's just kind of out of aces right now?
Well, Dustin and I early on had a conversation about this. Well, the first, kind of going back to that last answer, resiliency. You got to have resiliency. That will help you in those types of situation. Two, you got to seize the moment. Lost time is never found again, I think Benjamin Franklin said. And really, it's times like this where you can't look back. You can't look at, some people say cup half full, cup half empty. You got to look at that as an opportunity. It's times of disaster. It's times of crisis, really, when good things happen, because you're in a situation that ultimately will lead you to do things and be reactive and adaptable and flexible to things that you wouldn't normally do because of that. When you're in your normalcy, when you're in a calm scenario or calm environment, you tend to fall back on bad habits. But when you're in a time like this, you need to look at it as a time to be innovative, to be creative, reframe the moment in time as an opportunity for the entire team to contribute to your mission and find solutions for those problems.
Mm-hmm.
There were times in my career, I can remember, there was a situation after 9/11 with President Bush. We were planning for the 2004 G8 summit, and we were expecting just really a terrible event. Just the state of the world, the terrorist situation, after 9/11. And we were really just thinking it was just going to be a bad event, especially after the last World Trade Organization event in Seattle. And we use that as an opportunity that even today we changed policy to be able to support that event that is still being used today, even for this pandemic crisis event. But it was an opportunity to do that because 9/11 and that particular type of environment that we were in. But as an individual, you need to look at that as that opportunity. Don't look at it as and be depressed about your environment. You look at it as an opportunity for you to improve, to enhance your skills, to enhance your mission, even just as Southwestern Advantage has done under your leadership. It's really about that opportunity to be innovative and creative and pivot to be able to handle that adverse situation and the challenges at hand.
Well, that's a lot of encouragement right there, Mike, that if people are in a situation because their habit patterns have just no longer work, they need to change and get new habit patterns. They need to get resilient.
Absolutely.
They need to look to their relationships, work on good self-talk, and how important all those are.
And it's about being a part of a team too. You just kind of brought it up. Be a good team leader, be a good teammate, and be a good follower. And really, it's those teams that support each other in those times. And that can be your family, that can be your business team. It's really those relationships that will help you through those times. So as a teammate, be following, be calling. If you notice one of your team members who is having trouble dealing with that particular situation, call them, spend some time with them, give them some advice and help them get through that situation. It really is that where that team comes into play and helps each other is during those tough times.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know without the team, there's no way that Southwestern Advantage would be where we are today, because all the best ideas for our response certainly didn't come from me. They came from the team members, and getting out of the way and helping them do what they can do best is always the way. It's fantastic.
William Arthur Ward said, adversity causes some men to break, others to break records. And certainly Southwestern Advantage, under your leadership and as that team has developed, they're off to break records. And you're certainly an example of that.
I appreciate that very much, Mike. Had lots of good examples and continue to all around. And just trying to breathe once in a while, as my wife reminds me. Breathing is a really good idea, and getting recentered on what's right, principles, and going for those makes such a massive difference.
It's that resiliency that we talked about. Exactly.
Mm-hmm. And as Rudyard Kipling said, if you can keep your head while all around you are losing theirs, then you'll be a man, my son. And I'm going to amend that to say, or a woman these days. Kipling, unfortunately, didn't quite get the sharing the gender credit, but it's okay. We're surrounded by great people and we can all learn from them. Well, Mike Scholes, thank you for blessing us today on the Action Catalyst. You are a person of principle, you're a person of character, and we are very thankful that you're part of this team and for sharing today.
Dan, thank you so much for having me. This has been an awesome experience. And thank you for your leadership and everything that you do day to day.
We'll continue to. And also know that your wife is a nurse, so thank her from all of us for being one of those first responders and people on the front lines making a difference.
Absolutely. She has certainly helped me through this crisis, and I look for her for advice every time I put out a message. So
that's a smart thing. I love it. Well, Mike, thanks so much. Stay safe, and we look forward to seeing you soon face to face.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please make sure to subscribe. To stay updated on everything that the Action Catalyst is up to, make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Action Catalyst and Twitter at Catalyst_Action. Thanks for listening. This episode is sponsored by Southwestern Coaching. Southwestern Coaching has helped over 12,000 people increase their incomes by over 25% on average. As a successful salesperson, you know the importance of increasing your sales, but sometimes you might just need a little extra push and accountability to meet your goals and grow your business. Southwestern Coaching will help you increase your income through one-on-one sales and leadership coaching tailored specifically to your needs. Together, we will elevate sales. To schedule your free one-on-one business action planning session with a Southwestern coach, go to www.southwesternconsulting.com/action catalyst.